Hey there folks, today is the big reveal for my orchid that I've been tracking all 8 petals blooming, and today is the big reveal that I'm going to share with you. But before that, the backstory of this orchid, and there's more to come on the orchid itself and care and all that, but the backstory of this orchid is that I bought it in one of those typical store containers. I think what are those, the 2-cup, maybe 4-cup ones, and it was doing okay inside, but I thought it would do so much better outside, and that's because I'm fortunate, and where I live it is conducive to growing orchids outside. And so last year I transposed it into this thing, so there was a hole here. And I thought, smart me, I'll just put it here on the hole, which I did. Well, the bees found a weak spot, and they went down into the trunk of this part of the avocado tree, the part you can't see, this part, and came out one day, and there was just this swarm stopping me from getting to my orchids. And so I called the beekeeper, and long story short, he put a box here, and this funnel was for them to funnel out and into the box, which worked, and the queen and everyone left. So anyway, for him to put the box here, he had to move the orchid around to here, and it's still thriving. But that's the backstory, and it is a hybrid, so as we're going to find out later on, 3 colors. But today's the big reveal, so enjoy. So before orchid updates, look at all the ants up on their pursuit in growing their colony. Everyone grows and everything grows. Alright, update time. First, there was 1. And then there were 2. And then something happened. And then there were 3. And then something else happened. And now we're at 4, with 1, 2, 3, 4 more to go. Still growing. Yep, update time. First, there was 1. And then there were 2. Something happened, and hello. And there were 3. Then something happened, and now there is 4 and 5, and still have 3 to go. For the full reveal, and tails wagging in the back. Lizard seeking. It is orchid update time again, folks. First, there was 1. Then there were 2. Something happened. And then there were 3. Something else happened. Then there were 4. Something else happened. Then there were 5. Something else happened. Then there were 6. And number 7 is starting to open. It is orchid update time again, folks. First, there was 1. Then there were 2. Something happened. And then there were 3. Something else happened. Then there were 4. Something else happened. Then there were 5. Something else happened. Then there were 6. And number 7 is starting to open. Number 7. And we still have number 8 to go. But there you have it, folks. Orchid update. And here we go. Today is the big reveal. We started out with 1. Something happened and 1 becomes 2. Something happened and 2 became 3. Something else happened and 3 became 4. Nature happened and 4 became 5. 5 became 6. 6 became 7. And finally, 7 became 8. And there you have it. All 8. Like orchids, we do not all thrive in the same conditions. Some of us require greater care, patience, and the right environment to fully become what we were meant to be. You know, and maybe that's the deeper question. Growth isn't weakness for needing the right conditions. It's wisdom for knowing where we were meant to bloom. Yep, I think so. The orchid by nature is a parasite, I like to call it. A beautiful parasite. Especially when it's a hybrid. And even though it's a parasite, it still requires certain ideal conditions to exist, such as lots of moisture and humidity, very little sunshine. And I say it's a parasite because it needs a host to survive, such as a tree, living or dead. Moisture, like I said, and plenty of patience and time. And this one is not the only one. She's looking for lizards. I have another one right here, and that's where patience and time comes in, because it's going to be just as pretty, but it's not hybrid as this one is. As you can see underneath, the different colors. And then before they wither, some of that moves to the front of the petals, and they take on that hue. But beautiful parasite. Alright folks, hope you enjoyed that as much as we enjoyed bringing it to you. Don't want to do too much of this type episodes because the algorithms are a little funky. So we'll try to incorporate what we can though. But I wanted to share that orchid with you because I think it says and means a lot if we put it in context. And they're beautiful. Anyway, folks, on to our next conversation, which is next week. You be good out there. Take care of each other. Take care of yourselves. And we'll talk again soon. I'll see you.